The complete work of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 5, Section 7, Writings. Modern Paris is, to a great extent, the creation of Napoleon III. He completed that material transformation of the city which had already been begun at the fall of the ancient monarchy. The student of the history of France need not be remembered how its people were oppressed by the absolute monarchs of France prior to the French Revolution. Napoleon III caused himself to be proclaimed empire by sheer force of arms, wading through blood. Since the first French Revolution, the French people the French people were always fickle and thus a source of alarm to the emperor. Hence, the emperor, in order to keep his subject content and to please the ever unstable mass of the Paris, by giving them work, went on continually making new and magnificent public roads and embankments and building gates, gateways, theatres, and many other architectural structures, leaving the monuments of the old Paris as before. Not only was the city transferred in all directions by new thoroughfares, straight and wide, with sumptuous, sum, sumptuous houses raised or restored, but a line of fortification was built, doubling the area of the city. Thus arose the boulevard, boulevards, and the fine quarters of the Antine and other neighborhoods, and the avenue of the Champs Elysees, which is unique in the world and was reconstructed. This avenue is so broad that down the middle and on both the sides of it run gardens all along, and in one place it has taken the circular shape which comprises a city front, and towards the west, called Place de la Concorde. Round this place, the La Concorde, are statues in the form of women representing the 8 chief towns of France. One of these statues represents the district of the Strasbourg. This district was wrestled from the hands of the French by the Germans after the Battle of 1870. The pain of this loss the French have not yet been able to get over, and that statue is still covered with flowers and garlands, offered in the memory of the dead spirit, as it were. As men places garland over the tombs of their dead relations, so garlands are placed on that statue at one time or another. It seems to me that the Chandni Chowk of Delhi, Chandni Chowk of the Delhi. It seems to me that Chandni Chowk of Delhi might have been at one time somewhat like the place de la Concordia. Here and there, columns of victory, triumphals, archers, and sculptures art is in the form of few statues of men and women, lions, etc., adorn the square. The very big triumphal column is imitation of Trajan's column, made of gunmetal, is erected in Place Vendôme in memory of great hero Napoleon I. On the sides are engraved the victories of his reign, and on the top is the figure of Napoleon Bonaparte. In the place de la Bastille stands the column of July in memory of the Revolution of July 1789. On the side of the old fortress, the Bastille, afterward used as the state prison. Here were imprisoned those who incurred the king's displeasures. In those old days, without any trial or anything of the kind, the king would issue a warrant bearing the royal seal called lettre de cachet. Then, without any enquiry as to what good acts the victim had done for his country or whether he was really guilty or not, without even any question as to what he actually did to incur the king's wrath, he would be at once thrown into the Bastille. In the fair favorites of the kings were displeased with anyone, they could obtain by request a lettre de cachete from the king against that man, and the poor man would at once be sent to Bastille. Of the unfortunate who were imprisoned there, where few ever came out. When afterward the whole country rose as one man in revolt against such oppression and tyranny and raised the cry of individual liberty, all are equal. No one is high and low. The people of Paris, in their mad excitement, attacked the king and queen. The very first thing the mob did was to pull down the Bastille, the symbol of extreme tyranny of man over man, and passed the night in dancing, singing, and feasting on the spot. The king tried to escape, but the people managed to catch him, and hearing that the father in law of the king, the Emperor of Austria, was sending soldiers to aid his son in law, became blind with rage and killed the king, became blind with rage and killed the king and queen. The whole French nation became mad in the name of liberty and equality. France became a republic. They killed all the nobility whom they could get hold on, and many of the nobility gave up their titles and rank and made common causes with the subject people. Not only so, they called all the nation of the world to rise, awake, the kill of the kings, who are all tyranny. Let all be free and have equal rights. Then all the kings of the Europe began to tremble in fear, lest this fire might spread into their countries. Lest it lest it might burn their thrones, and hence determined to put it down. They attacked France from all directions. On the other side, the leaders of French Republic proclaimed, "Our nation land is in peril, come one and all." And the proclamation soon spread like the flames of a conflagration throughout the length and breadth of France. The young, the old, the man, the woman, the rich, the poor, the high, the low, singing their martial song, La Marseillaise, the inspiring national song of France, came out crowded of the poor French people in rugs, barefooted, and in that severe cold, and half starved, came out with guns on their shoulders for the destruction of the wicked and the salvation of their home, and boldly faced the vast united force of the Europe. The whole Europe could not stand the onrush of that French army. At the head and front of the French army stood a hero at the moment of whose finger the whole world trembled. He was Napoleon. With the edge of the sword and at the point of the bayonet, he thrust liberty, equality, and for fraternity into the very bone and marrow of Europe, and thus the victory of the tricolor cockade was achieved. Later, Napoleon became the Emperor of France and successfully accomplished the consolidation of the French Empire. Subsequently not been favored with an heir to the throne, he divorced the partner of his life in will and who, the guiding angel of his good fortune, the Empress Josephine, and married the daughter of Emperor of Austria. But the wheel of his luck turned with his desertion of Josephine. His army died in the snow and the ice during his expedition against Russia. Europe, getting this opportunity, forced him to abdicate his throne and sent him as an exile to an island and put on the throne one of the old royal dynasty. The wounded lion escaped from the island and presented himself again in France. The whole of France welcomed him and railed under his banner, and the reigning king fled. But this luck was broken once for all, and it never returned. Again, the whole Europe united against him and defeated him at the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon boarded an Englishman of war and surrendered himself. The English exiled him and kept him as a lifelong prisoner in the distant island of Saint Helena. Again a member of Again a member of old royal family of France was rein reinstated as king. Later on, the French people became restless under the old monarchy, rose in rebellion, drove away the king and his family, and re-established republic. In the course of time, the nephew of the great Napoleon became a favorite with the people, and by means of intrigues, he proclaimed himself emperor, and he was Napoleon III. For some time, his reign was very powerful, but being defeated in conflict with the Germans, he lost his throne and the France became once more a republic, and since then, down to the present day, she has continued to be republican. Next, progress of civilization. The theory of evolution, which is the foundation of almost all Indian schools of thought, has now made its way into the physical science of Europe. It has been held by the religions of all other countries except India that the universe in its entirety is composed of parts distinctly separate from each other. God, nature, man is stand by itself, isolated from one another. Likewise, beast, bird, insect, tree, earth, stone, metal, etc., are all distinct from one another. God created them separate from the beginning. Knowledge is to find unity in midst of the diversity, to establish unity among things which appear to us to be different from one another. That particular relation by which man finds this sameness is called a law. This is what is known as natural law or nature's law. I have said before that our education, intelligence, and thought are all spiritual, all find expression in religion. In the West, their manifestation is in the external, in the physical and social planes. Thinkers in the ancient India gradually came to understand that idea of separateness was erroneous, that there was a connection among all those distinct objects. There was a unity which pervaded the whole universe: trees, shrubs, animals, men, devas, even God Himself, and the Advaitin, reaching the climax in the line of thoughts, declare all to be but the manifestation of the One. In reality, the metaphysical and the physical universe are one, and the name of this one is Brahman. And the perception of separateness is an error. They called it Maya, avidya, or nescience. This is the end of knowledge. If this matter is not comprehended at the present day by anyone outside India, for India we leave out of consideration. How is one to be regarded as a Pandit? However, most of the erudite erudite men in the West are coming to understand this in their own way through physical science, but how that one has become the many. Neither do neither do we understand nor do they. We too have offered the solution of these questions by saying that it is beyond our understanding, which is limited. They too have done the same, but the variation that the one has undergone, the different sort of species and individuality it is assuming that can be understood, and the inquiry into this is called science. So now know almost all are known evolutionists in the West has small animals through gradual steps change into bigger ones, and big animals sometimes deteriorate and become smaller and weaker, and in course of time die out. So also man is not born into the civilized state all on the sudden. In these days an assertion to the contrary is no longer believed in by anybody among the thoughtful in the West, especially because of the evidence that their ancestors were in the savage state only a few centuries ago, and from that state such a great transformation has taken place in in so short a time. So they say that all men must have gradually evolved and are evolving from the uncivilized state. Primitive men used to manage their work with implements of wood and stone. They wore skin and leaves and lived in the mountain caves or in the huts thatched with leaves made somewhat after the fashion of bird nest, and thus somehow passed their days. Evidence in the proof Evidence in proof of this is being obtained in all countries by excavating the earth, and also in some few places men at that same primitive stage are still living. Gradually to men learned to use soft metals such as tin and copper, and found out how to make tools and weapons by fusing them. The ancient Greek and Babylonians and Egyptians did not know the use of iron from long time. Even when they Even when they became comparatively civilized and wrote books and used gold and silver. At the same time, the Mexicans, the Peruvians, the Mayas, and the other races among the aborigines of the New World were comparatively civilized and used to build large temples. The use of gold and silver was quite common among them. In fact, the greed for their gold and silver led the Spaniard to destroy them. But they managed to make all these things toiling very hard with flint implements. They did not know iron even by name. In the primitive stage, men used to kill animal and fish by making a bow and arrow, or by using use of a net and live upon them. He learned to till the ground and tend the cattle. Taming wild animals, he made them work for him or reared them for his own eating when necessary. The cow, the horse, the hog, elephant, camel, goat, sheep, fowls, birds, and other animals became domesticated. Of all these, the dog is the first friend of man. So in the course of time, the tilling of the soil came into existence. The fruits, roots, herbs, vegetables, and the and the various cereals eaten by men are quite different now from what they were when they grew in a wild state. Through human exertion and civilization, wild fruits gained in size and acquired toothsomeness, and wild grass was transformed into delicious rice. Constant changes are going on, no doubt, in nature by its own processes. New species of trees and plants, birds and beasts are being always created in nature through changes brought about by time, environment and other causes. Thus, before the creation of man, nature was changing the trees and plants and other animals by slow and gentle degree. But when man came to the scene, he began to effect changes with rapid strides. He continuously transformed the native fauna and flora of one country to another, and by crossing them, various new species of plants and animals were brought into existence. In the primitive stage, there was no marriage, but matrimonial relation matrimonial relations sprang up. At first, the matrimonial relation depended all amongst all communities on the mother. There was not much fixity about the father. The child were named after the mother. All the wealth was in the hand of the woman, for they were to bring up the children. In the course of time, wealth, the woman included, passed into the hands of the male members. The male said, "All this wealth and grain are mine. I have grown this in the field, or got them by plunder or and other means. And if anyone dispute my claim and want to have a share of them, I will fight him." In the same way, he said, "All these women are exclusively mine. If anyone encroaches upon my right to them, I will fight him." Thus, there originated a modern marriage system. Women became as much the property of man as his slaves and cattle. The ancient marriage customs was that the male of one tribe married the woman of another, and even this then the woman was snatched away by force. In course of time, this business of taking away the bride by violence dropped away, and the marriage was contracted with the mutual consent of both the parties. But every custom leaves a faint trace of itself behind, and even now we find in every country a mock attack is made on such occasions upon the bridegroom. In Bengal and Europe, handful of rice are thrown at the bridegroom, and in North India, the bride's woman friend abuses the bridegroom's party, calling them names, and so on. Society began to be formed and varied according to different countries. Those who lived on the seashore mostly earned their livings by fishing in the sea. Those who lived in the plain by agriculture. The mountaineers kept large flock of sheep, and dwellers in the desert tended goats and camels. Others lived in the forest and maintained themselves by hunting. The dwellers on the plain learned agriculture. Their struggle existed for their struggle for existence became less keen. They had time for thoughts and culture, thus became more and more civilized. But with the advance of civilization, their bodies grew weaker and weaker. The difference in physique between those who always lived in the open air and whose principal article of food was animal diet, and others who dwelt in houses and lived mostly on grains and vegetables became greater and greater. The hunter, the shepherd, the fishermen turned robbers or pirates. Whenever food became scarce and plundered the dwellers in the plains. This, in their turn, united themselves in bands of large numbers for the common interest of self-preservation, and thus little kingdom began to be formed. The Devas lived on grains and vegetables, were civilized, dwelled in agriculture, dwelled in village, towns, gardens, and wore woolen clothings. The Asuras dwell in the hills and mountains, deserts, or on the seashore, lived on the wild animals and roots and fruits of the forest, and on what cereals they could get from the devas in exchange of for this or for their cows and sheep, and wore the hides of wild animals. The Devas were weak in body and could not endure hardship. The Asuras, on the other hand, were hardy with frequent fasting and were quite capable of suffering all sorts of hardships. Whenever food was scarce among the Asuras, they set out from their hills and seashores to plunder towns and villages. At times, they attacked the Devas for wealth and grains, and whenever the Devas failed to unite themselves in large number against them, they were sure to die at the hands of Asuras. But the Devas were stronger in intellect, commenced inventing all sort of machines for warfare. The Brahmastra, the Garudastra, the Vaishnavastra, the Shivastra, all these weapons are miraculous power belonged to the Devas. The Asuras fought with ordinary weapons, but they were enormously strong. They defeated the Devas rapidly, but they never cared to become the civilized or learn agriculture or cultivate their intellect. If the victorious asuras try to reign over the vanquished devas in swarga, they were sure to be outwitted by the devas superior intellect and skill, and before long turned their own places after plundering. The Devas, whenever they were united, forced them to retire. Mark you, either into the hills or the forest or the seashores. Gradually, each party gained in number and became stronger and stronger. Millions of Devas were united, and so were millions of Asuras. Violent conflict and fight went on, and along with them, the intermingling of these two forces. From the fusion of these different types and races, our modern society's manners, customs began to be evolved. New ideas sprang up and new sciences began to cultivate. One class of men went on manufacturing articles of utility and comfort, either by manual or intellectual labor. A second class took upon themselves the charge of protecting them, and all the proceeded or to change or exchange their things. And it so happened that the band of fellows who were very clever undertook to take these things from one place to another, and on the plea of remuneration of this, appropriated the major portion of their profit as their due. One tilled the ground, the second guarded the products from being robbed, and third look it to another place. Looked after it. Second guarded the products from the robbers and looked after it, and third took it to another place, and fourth bought it. The cultivator got almost nothing. He who guarded the product took away all as much of it as he could by force. The merchant who brought it to market took the lion's share, and the buyer had to pay out of all proportion for the things, and smarted under the burden. The protector came to be known as the king, and he who took the commodities from one place to another became the merchant. These two did not produce anything, but still snatched away the best part of the things and made themselves fat by virtually ripening most of the fruits of the cultivator's toil and labor. The poor fellow who produced all these things had often to go without his mill and cry for a god for help. Now, with the march of event, all this matter grew more and more evolved. Knots upon knots multiplied, and out of this tangled network has evolved our modern complex society. But the marks of the bygone character persist and do not die out completely. Those who in their former birth tended sheep, tended sheep or lived on fishing or the like or the like take to habit of piracy, robbery and similar occupations in their civilized incarnation also, with no forest to hunt in, no hill or mountain in the neighborhood on which to tend the flocks. By the ancient of birth, by the incident of birth in the civilized society, he cannot get enough opportunities for either hunting, fishing, or grazing cattle. He is obliged, therefore, to rob or steal impelled by his own nature. What else can he do? And the worthy daughters of those far famed ladies of the Puranic age, whose name we are to repeat every morning, they can no longer marry more than one husband at a time, even if they want to, and so they turn unchaste. In these and other ways, men of different types and dispositions, civilization, and savage, born with the nature of devas and asuras, have become fused together and form modern society. And that is why we see in every society God playing in this various form, the sadhu Narayana, the robber Narayan, and so on. Again, the character of a particular society came to be determined as Daivi, that is divine, or Asuri, or non divine quality, in proportion has one or the other of these two different types of person preponderated within it. The whole of the Asian civilization was first evolved on the plains near large rivers and on fertile soil on the bank of Ganga. The youngster Cain and Euphrates, the original foundation of all this civilization is agriculture, and all of them, the Daivi nature predominates. Most of the European civilization, on the other hand, originated either in hilly countries or this civilization, and there the Asuri nature is preponderant. preponderant so far has can be inferred in modern times. Central Asia and the deserts of Arabia seems to have been the home of asuras, issuing from their fastness these shepherds and hunters, the descendants of Asuras, been united in hordes after hordes, chased the civilized Devas and scattered them all over the world. Of course, there was a primitive race of aborigines in the continent of Europe. They lived in the mountain caves, and the more intellect among them erected platform by planting sticks in the comparatively shallow parts of the water and build houses thereon. They used arrows, spearheads, knives, and axes, all made of flint, and managed every kind of work with them. Gradually, the current of the Asian race began to break forth upon Europe, and has its effect, some parts became competitively civilized. The language of a certain people in Russia resembled the language of the southern India, but for the most part, this barbarians remained as barbarians as ever, till a civilized race from Asia Minor conquered the adjacent part of the Europe and founded a high order of new civilization. To us, they are known as Yavanas. To Europe as Greeks. Afterward, in Italy, a barbarian tribe known as the Romans conquered the civilized Its- Etruscans. Civilized Etruscans assimilated their culture and learning and established a civilization of their own on the ruins of that of the conquered race. Gradually, the Romans carried their victorious arms in all directions. All the barbarian tribes in the southwest of Europe came under the suzerainty of Europe. Only the barbarians of the forest living in the northern region retained independence. In the influx of the time, however, the Romans became enervated by being enslaved loose or armies of Asuras on Europe. Driven from their homes by the onslaught of these asuras, the barbarians of northern Europe fell upon the Roman emperor, and Rome was destroyed. Encountered by the force of this Asian invasion, a new race sprang up sprang up through the fusion of the European barbarians with the remnants of Rome and Greek. At that time, the Jews been conquered and driven away from the homes by the Romans, scattered themselves throughout in Europe, and with them their new religion. Christianity also spread all over Europe. All these different races and their creeds and ideas, all these different hordes of asuras, heated by the fire of constant struggle and warfare, began to melt and fuse in Mahamaya's crucible. And from that fusion, the modern European race has sprung up. Thus, a very barbarous European race came into existence with all shades of complexion, from the swarthy color of the Hindus to the milk white color of the North, with black, brown, red, and white hair, black, grey, and blue eyes resembling the fine features of the face, the nose, the eyes of the Hindus, or the flat faces of the Chinese. For some time, they continued to fight among themselves. Those of the north leaded the life of the pirate, has harassed and killed the comparatively civilized races. In the meantime, however, the two heads of the Christian churches, the Pope in French and Italy, Pep of Italy, and the Patriarch of Constantinople, insinuating themselves, began to exercise their authority over these brutal barbarian hordes, over their kings, queens, and people. On the other side, again, Mohammedanism arose in the desert of Arabia. The white Arabs, inspired by the teachings of the great sage, bore down upon the earth with an irresistible force and vigor. That torrent, that torrent carrying everything before it, entered Europe from both the east and west, and along with this tide, the learning and culture of India and ancient Greece were carried into Europe. A tribe of Asuras from Central Asia, through known as the Seljuk Tatars, accepted Mohammedanism and conquered Asia Minor and other countries of Asia. The various attempts of the Arabs to conquer India proved unsuccessful. The wave of Mohammedan conquest, which had swallowed the whole earth, had to fall back before India. They attacked Sindh once, but could not hold it, and they did not make any other attempt after that. But a few centuries afterwards,